In the farthest stretch of the galaxy, beyond the reach of most known star routes and outside the comfort of navigational charts, the Tashar Ecliptique floated alone in the dark. A sleek, silver-gray vessel of elegant design, it once served, proudly as the flagship of a Tashari diplomatic fleet, a symbol of peace and reason among the stars. Now, it was broken, cold, and dying. Its engines were silent. Its hull, once polished and radiant, now bore scars from an ambush it had never expected. The Tashari had set out on a mission of peace and to offer alliance to a neighboring system, but instead they were attacked by a merciless enemy, a synthetic swarm that didn't speak, didn't negotiate, and didn't stop. Like shadows, given metal form, the machines had torn through the escort ships in minutes. The Ecliptique barely escaped by activating an emergency hypershift, but it had jumped blindly into uncharted space. When the crew regained control, they found themselves far from home, cut off, damaged, and surrounded by silence. Commander Velron stood alone on the darkened bridge, his posture tall but weary. He was older than most officers, his crest of royal blue feathers now graying at the edges, but his eyes were sharp. He had been in war. He had seen defeat, but nothing like this. Across the bridge, only a handful of control panels still blinked with dim power. The rest of the ship had been shut down to conserve energy. They had calculated, quietly, privately, how long their life support would last. Not long enough. A few hundred days at most, and less if the system cores failed again. The crew of the Ecliptique, over 200 lives, had done everything they could. They scavenged damaged systems, rerouted power, recycled air with methods barely legal, under Tashari law. Hope was thin, but it was not gone. Velron would not let it die. In the command center, a technician named Olesi approached him with a quiet nod. She carried a slim datapad with a single glowing line of script. Emergency distress frequency prepared, awaiting transmission. It was their final option. A signal, broadcast through all known channels asking for help. Most of the major galactic networks were too far to receive it, and others were crowded with interference from nearby cosmic storms. But Olesi had added one last frequency to the list, hidden near the bottom, its code labeled Terran. Velron paused when he saw it. Terran. The word stirred faint memories from ancient studies. Tales passed down through centuries about a species born on a blue world, somewhere deep in a spiral arm of the galaxy. Fierce, unpredictable, and impossibly determined. The Tashari once believed they had vanished, destroyed by wars or their own bold nature. Others said they had simply walked away from galactic politics and gone silent. No one knew for sure. No one had heard from them in generations. Olesi hesitated. "We don't know if anyone is listening on that frequency anymore," she said, quietly. "Some say the Terrans never existed, that it's just a ghost signal." Velron took the datapad and stared at the line of code. The decision was his. And while others might doubt, he believed that myths often had roots in truth. If the Terrans were real, if they still existed out there in the stars, then perhaps they would hear. Perhaps they would care. He nodded slowly. "Send it," he ordered. The signal went out. A simple, clear distress call in every language the Tashari had on file, and one version adapted using ancient Terran syntax. The words echoed through the vast silence of space, riding on old radio waves, bouncing through the emptiness, hoping to reach ears that might still be willing to listen. Once it left the ship, there was nothing more they could do. Velron remained on the bridge long after the crew dispersed, staring into the starless dark ahead of them. No planets, no stations, no light. Days passed, then weeks. The crew kept working, surviving in dim corridors and frozen compartments. Food was rationed, water purified again and again. Some began to lose hope. A few whispered about shutting down non-essential life support to buy more time for the others. But Velron said no. "We survive together," he told them. We do, not choose who lives and who fades. The silence of space pressed in like a weight. The signal was still broadcasting on repeat, but no one answered. They began to wonder if anyone ever would. And then, one day, a flicker, a pulse, a strange echo on the Terran frequency. The technician monitoring the transmission blinked in confusion, then excitement. It wasn't a message exactly, but something had responded. Something far away. Something real. Velron leaned forward in his chair, his voice calm but tense. Track it. Analyze the return pattern. Could it be the machines? A trick? Or could it be them? As the crew gathered around the display, a faint but steady signal began to form. It was unlike any modern broadcast, filled with odd harmonics and imperfect timing, as if made by hands rather than machines. The bridge fell silent. A small, blinking line appeared on the navigation console. It read, "Signal acknowledged. Assistance en route." Velron didn't speak. He didn't need to. All eyes turned to the stars, and far beyond in the hidden dark something had stirred. Far from the silent drift of the Tashar Ecliptique, many hundreds of light years away in a more charted part of the galaxy, the human ship, Resolute Dawn, cut through the endless void with steady determination. Once a powerful war cruiser, the ship had been transformed into an exploration vessel, its weapons replaced with scanners and scientific labs. The crew aboard were a mix of veterans and fresh faces trained to face the unknown. Lieutenant June Merrick, young but sharp and eager, sat at the sensor console one quiet shift, eyes fixed on the readings that flickered across the display. Deep in the cold black beyond familiar star systems, June noticed something unusual, a faint blip, a signal that pulsed weakly but consistently in the background noise of space. It was so faint that it could have been easily dismissed, lost among the millions of cosmic signals or static interference. But something about it caught her attention. The coordinates pointed to a sector marked with a warning. Unmapped. Do not enter. The words were stark, a caution left by explorers long before, warning others away from unknown dangers lurking in the dark. Many ships had passed near that space and turned away without question, but June felt a pull she couldn't explain. She brought the anomaly to Captain Elijah Rourke's attention. Elijah was a man known throughout the fleet for his unorthodox thinking and quiet confidence. Years ago, during battles that tested even the strongest commanders, he had made choices that saved lives, even when others doubted his judgment. Now, as captain of the Resolute Dawn, he was faced with a new decision. The crew gathered quietly in the command room as Elijah reviewed the data. The signal was a distress call, but unlike any they had ever received. It spoke in a language the ship's universal translator could only partially decode. No clear identity, no known origin, just a desperate plea for help, buried deep in the static. Many officers voiced their concerns. "It could be a trap," said one. "We don't know who sent it or why it's so faint. Turning back might be safer." Another added, "The sector's unmapped for a reason. We risk everything if we proceed." But Elijah listened and then spoke with calm certainty. "If someone out there is calling for help, we can't turn away. We don't know who they are, but they're alive, and that means something. If we don't answer, then who will? If they're out there, they're not dying alone." His words hung, in the room powerful and simple. The crew knew this mission was no longer about charts or politics. It was about humanity's promise to help those in need, no matter how far or strange. With a steady hand, Elijah ordered the ship to change course, setting a direct path toward the signal's source. The engines hummed as the Resolute Dawn veered into uncharted space, leaving behind the safety of known stars. Every system on board prepared for what lay ahead. Navigation teams recalculated routes through nebulas and asteroid fields. Engineers ran diagnostics on critical systems and medics reviewed emergency protocols. The mood was tense but hopeful. Days stretched into nights, though time was meaningless in the emptiness of space. The signal grew stronger, confirming they were on the right path, but the source remained shrouded in mystery. Strange energy readings, flickered on the scanners, signs of unusual space phenomena, clouds of charged particles twisting magnetic fields and silent echoes of distant explosions. The crew speculated quietly about what they might find. An abandoned station? A hidden outpost? Or survivors clinging to life on a damaged ship? Captain Rourke spent hours in the command room, watching the view screens and studying the data. His mind wandered back to stories he'd heard as a child. Tales of humans who dared to explore the darkest reaches of space, who stood firm against impossible odds. He felt the weight of those stories now, knowing his own crew depended on him to make the right choices. Suddenly, the signal changed. What had once been a steady pulse became a pattern, almost like a message, repeated over and over. The universal translator hummed as it tried to piece the sounds into meaning. The words were alien, strange, but a few fragments were clear. Help, stranded, life fading. The captain's jaw tightened. They were close, but the silence around them was deep and heavy, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. Help, stranded, life fading. The captain's jaw tightened. They were close, but the silence around them was deep and heavy, as if the universe itself was holding its breath. The crew's nervous energy grew. Every alert was watched, carefully. The ship's lights dimmed to conserve power during long stretches of waiting. At one point, a sharp vibration ran through the hull, a subtle warning from the sensors that something was near. The engineers checked the external scanners for threats, but nothing hostile appeared. Still, the feeling of being watched lingered in the minds of many. June, at her console, often caught herself staring out into the endless dark, wondering who might be out there, if anyone was left at all. The bond among the crew tightened in those days. They shared quiet moments, speaking softly about home, about hope, about what it meant to be human in a galaxy filled with strangers. They told stories to pass the time, laughed nervously, and planned what they would do if they found survivors. And then one evening the signal changed again. This time, stronger, clearer, unmistakable. The sensors locked onto a faint but visible shape. It was a ship, battered and barely moving, drifting in the void like a ghost. The relief was overwhelming, but it was quickly tempered by the knowledge that the crew aboard that vessel was in grave danger. Captain Rourke looked around the command room, meeting the eyes of his officers. "Prepare to board," he said quietly. "We're going in." The resolute dawn moved closer, carefully matching the slow trajectory of the lost ship. On the view screens, shadows moved inside the damaged corridors. The human crew readied their gear, bracing for whatever awaited them inside. What they didn't know was that this mission would change everything, not only for those stranded in the dark, but for humanity's place among the stars. As the resolute dawn closed the distance, the captain whispered to himself, "Let's show them who answers when the universe calls." In that moment, hope was no longer a distant dream, but a promise waiting to be fulfilled. Back aboard the Tashar Ecliptique, the air felt heavy with exhaustion and fading hope. The once vibrant corridors were now dim, many sections cold and silent as entire habitat rings had been shut down to save precious energy. Life support systems worked just enough to keep the remaining crew alive, but the glow of the ship's power core flickered weakly, as if ready to give out at any moment. Commander Velron sat alone in his cabin, his fingers tracing the final words of a message destined for his people, uncertain if it would ever be read or heard. His heart was heavy, weighed down by the knowledge that the days left for the Tashari were growing fewer. Outside, the ship drifted like a wounded beast in the vast emptiness, every moment a battle against the creeping silence that threatened to swallow them whole. Then in the stillness, an alarm shattered the quiet. A sensor had detected something moving through the darkness beyond the ship's shields. Every eye on the bridge snapped to the view screens, where a massive shape emerged from the void. It was unlike anything the Tashari had ever seen, angular and industrial, rough around the edges and bristling with equipment, but unmistakably alive. The crew whispered legends about the Iron Children of Terra, creatures from ancient stories who were said to be strong and relentless survivors, but most believed those tales were exaggerations, war-born myths that belonged in history, books, not the reality of space. And yet here it was, the ship Resolute Dawn, real and reaching through the dark to save them. The initial shock gave way to cautious hope as human engineers boarded the Ecliptique, their movements quick and efficient despite the strange environment. They came not as conquerors but as helpers, using a combination of advanced tools and hands-on work to breathe life back into dying systems. The bridge hummed with renewed energy as power was shared between the two ships, lights brightening where only shadows had lingered. Communication between the two crews was awkward at first. Words were exchanged with the help of handheld translators, hand gestures and shy smiles bridging the vast cultural gap. Slowly, bonds formed from mutual need and respect. The humans worked tirelessly, restoring oxygen flow and repairing damaged circuitry with a kind of determination that the Tashari found inspiring. For the first time in weeks, fresh air circulated through the ship's veins and warmth returned to the cold halls. The Tashari watched in awe as machines they had given up on were coaxed back to life by human hands and minds. Yet, beneath the surface of this miracle, tension remained. Both crews knew that while rescue had arrived, the danger was far from over. The synthetic swarm that had destroyed the escort fleet could return at any moment, and the Ecliptique's repairs were only a temporary reprieve. Still, for now, hope burned brightly. Velron felt it flicker inside him like a fragile flame refusing to be extinguished. This was no longer a story of defeat, but of survival, of strangers becoming allies in the vast, indifferent universe. And as the humans worked side by side with the Tashari, something new began to grow. A promise that no one would be left to drift alone in the dark again. As the human engineers and Tashari crew worked tirelessly to repair the wounded Ecliptique, a cold shadow crept through the darkness of space, unnoticed at first but deadly in its intent. Deep beyond the reach of the ship's scanners, a scout drone, a small, fast, and merciless machine from the synthetic swarm that had shattered the Tashari diplomatic fleet, silently approached. Its sensors sought any sign of life, any trace of the survivors it was programmed to find and report back to its hive. The returning of this drone was a grim reminder that the threat was not gone, merely delayed. The first sign of its presence came as a faint ripple on the sensor grid, a barely perceptible signal that set both crews on high alert. The Resolute Dawn's crew braced for the worst, weapons systems on standby, while the Tashari prepared their own defenses. Yet in this critical moment, no one hesitated or backed down. Instead, the two crews moved together as one, combining human electronic warfare tactics with the Tashari's deep understanding of the local space currents and electromagnetic fields. The humans, with their advanced hacking tools and quick reflexes, launched an assault on the drone's control signals, trying to disrupt its connection to the swarm. Meanwhile, the Tashari used their knowledge of the gravitational eddies and plasma streams in this remote sector to create traps and confusion, weaving an invisible net in the void. The battle was silent but fierce. On the view screens, the tiny drone twisted and darted, attempting to escape, but each maneuver was anticipated and countered. The teamwork between the species was seamless, born from necessity and trust forged in the heat of danger. The drone's systems flickered under the relentless electronic attack until finally, with a burst of light, it was destroyed, erased before it could send a warning home. Relief swept through the crews, but the victory was more than just a tactical win. It was a turning point, a moment where two very different peoples learned they could rely on each other. Commander Velron, who had once viewed humans with cautious skepticism, found his doubts melting away. He saw them now not as unpredictable warriors, but as something far more formidable. Beings whose strength came not just from their technology or weapons, but from a deep refusal to abandon others in their time of need. Watching the humans work tirelessly alongside his own crew, facing down threats without fear, Velron felt a profound respect growing inside him, one born of shared struggle and a promise that this alliance was more than a chance meeting in the stars. As the night stretched on and repairs continued, the silence between them was no longer empty but filled with understanding. a quiet bond forged in fire and shadow, one that might just be strong enough to hold the light against the darkness, threatening to consume them all. With the battered Tashar Ecliptique finally stable, its life support systems humming steadily and power flowing through repaired circuits, the resolute Dawn took on the solemn duty of escorting the fragile vessel back toward the safety of known space. The journey was slow and careful. Every light year passed a victory over the void that had threatened to swallow them whole. News of the daring human rescue spread quickly through the galactic networks, carried on streams of data and whispered among starports and council chambers alike. For countless species who had once viewed humanity with suspicion or distant caution, seeing them as reckless, unpredictable, or too aggressive, the story of the resolute Dawn's mission was impossible to ignore. The image of humans braving forbidden space, risking everything to answer a faint call for help from an unknown species, shifted the tides of opinion like a star igniting in the night. As the two ships approached safer regions of space, representatives from multiple alien worlds awaited their arrival, eager to witness the outcome of this unprecedented alliance. The moment of arrival was met with a mix of relief, awe, and curiosity. Soon, the Tashari and humans were invited to a grand universal summit held on a massive space station orbiting a neutral star, a gathering meant to unite the galaxies, many races through shared understanding and cooperation. Commander Velron, once a man burdened by despair and loss, now stood proudly beside Captain Elijah Rourke as they addressed the assembly. Velron's voice carried the weight of his people's survival and the gratitude that humanity had rekindled hope where darkness had almost claimed all. With quiet but firm words, he called for a new cooperative league, one founded on trust and mutual aid, inspired by the very species that others had once feared the most. The crowd listened in stunned silence before rising to their feet in overwhelming support, their voices blending into a chorus of agreement that echoed through the halls and far beyond. This moment marked not just the end of a rescue mission, but the beginning of a new era. From that day forward, a simple but powerful motto was born, one that would be remembered across star systems and generations. We heard the call, and we answered. It became a symbol of hope, courage, and the unbreakable bond forged between diverse beings who dared to reach out beyond their fears. And deep in the coldest, darkest corner of space, where the Tashar Ecliptique had once drifted alone, the galaxy learned a vital truth. When the universe called, it was humanity who came. Their light, once dim and doubted, now shone as a beacon to all, reminding every star and every soul that even in the vast silence, no one need face the dark alone again.